commonly known as marijuana, can either be loved or hated by Americans. I know all of you have preconceived notions about whether you think it's right or wrong, but I challenge you to keep an open mind throughout my speech and truly listen to both sides. There is strong debate surrounding, and many researchers, policymakers, and writers present the argument for and against the legalization of marijuana. Throughout my speech, you'll learn about the history of marijuana, pros and cons of legalization, and where the future is headed. Dating back all the way to the 1960s, marijuana has been a highly debated topic. There are two simple schools of thought: those who think the legalization of marijuana is beneficial, and those who don't. History of legalization. Understanding marijuana's history in the United States is important so we can get the full picture behind this controversy. Paraphrasing from Jonathan Calkins et al. In the introduction of his book, Considering Marijuana Legalization, Insights for Other Vermont and Other Jurisdictions. In 1960s, marijuana was banned in all states, and people could get incarcerated for possessing, growing, or selling marijuana. In the 1970s, however, this kind of shifted, and a total of 12 states reduced or removed punishment for possessing small amounts of marijuana. This movement towards liberalization kind of came to a halt in 1978 when South Dakota reversed its decision to legalize marijuana. This is known as the Parents Movement. With 1 in 10 high schoolers using marijuana in 1979, parents fought to criminalize marijuana. Here is their campaign. It's protect our children, like they can't be using marijuana. And after South Dakota's Decriminalization Act, no state legalized marijuana for 20 years. However, the push towards legalization has been increasing and increasing as of late. Angela Dills et al. Talks about this rise in her book, The Effect of State Marijuana Legalizations, 2021 update. She says, in November 2012, Colorado and Washington approved ballot initiatives that legalized marijuana for recreational use under state law. Since then, 9 additional states, plus the District of Columbia, have followed suit. Voters in 4 other states approved ballot measures legalizing marijuana for the personal use in November 2020 election. While America has traditionally looked at marijuana through a negative lens, the new policies being passed reflect a shifting idea in America's head. Now that we know background information of the history of legalization, let's look at the pros and cons. Start with the pros. Many of the activists who argue for legalization think of marijuana as a replacement for alcohol. According to Dills et al., former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson has also advocated for marijuana legalization, predicting it would lead to less overall substance abuse because individuals addicted to alcohol or other substances would find marijuana a safer alternative. According to Mark Anderson and Daniel Reese in their article, The Public Health Effects of Legalizing Marijuana, there is convincing evidence that young adults increase their consumption of marijuana but consume less alcohol when marijuana is legalized. This leads to safer roads and highways. Marijuana would also help states in tax revenue. Paraphrased from John Hudak in his chapter, Weighing the Costs and Benefits of Legalization. After Colorado legalized marijuana, according to the state's Department of Revenue, the government made $135 million from marijuana-related taxes and fees. According to Dills et al., marijuana legalization advocates suggest that legalization reduces crime, raises tax revenue, lowers criminal justice expenditures, improves public health, and stimulates the economy. And this picture shows the growth of how much money it creates. And this is kind of a funny campaign ad. It's like marijuana is safer than peanuts because marijuana has 0 deaths, peanuts has 100. Now let's move to the cons. There are many health-related cons to legalization. Paraphrasing from Jonathan Calkins' chapter called Consequences of Marijuana Use. Frequent use of marijuana isn't healthy because the risk of one being dependent on marijuana is so high. Dependence acts as a scary thing for marijuana users. 1 in 10 users will reach the level of dependency, and 1 in 6 who started using marijuana as a kid will experience dependency. While one cannot overdose on marijuana, high doses are known to cause cardiovascular complications. According to Calkins et al., the Rocky Mountain high-intensity drug trafficking area reports that ED visits, or emergency room visits, related to marijuana increased in Colorado by 29% after the first year of legalization. Marijuana is also known to cause high levels of anxiety. Frequent marijuana users in Colorado had panic attacks and went to the hospital. Chronic use of marijuana is also known to cause some male testicular and prostate cancer. Marijuana also plays a large effect on brain development. In a recent study comparing non-users and users, results showed significant differences in gray matter density in several brain regions that involved in reward processing. A great quote from Dills et al. Sums up the push against legalization. It says, critics argue that legalization spurs marijuana and other drug or alcohol use, increases crime, diminishes traffic safety, harms public health, and lowers teen educational achievement. Now that we both know both sides of the story, let's look at where marijuana is headed. While controversy is at an all-time high with marijuana, there is no doubt marijuana legalization is trending upward, and the proof is in the pudding. According to John Hudak in his chapter, Racial Justice and the Future of Marijuana Reform, in 2017, Colorado lawmakers passed a law that allowed low-level marijuana offenders to get their records sealed. Washington did the same thing in 2019. Also, policymakers look at marijuana as a moneymaker for the poor communities. Like I said earlier, they're not going to cancel marijuana because it's making them so much money. And reforms have started in legal states to help people in low-income communities develop marijuana businesses. In 2019, Congress took a step towards approving a bill that would legalize marijuana nationally. According to Hudak, the bill removes marijuana from the list of scheduled substances, but allows states to opt out nationwide legalization. Another important act is the MORE Act. This started in 2020, and according to Hudak, the bill serves as the most comprehensive legalization and racial and social justice legalization to be filed at this point in the history of the U.S. Congress. The legislation also becomes the first bill ever passed by a committee of Congress that would legalize marijuana nationally. In the coming years, I predict complete legalization of marijuana. Since the 1960s, the debate over the legalization of marijuana can be summed up between two completely different beliefs. There's those for and against. Now more than ever, there is a strong push for legalization of marijuana. Only time will tell if this movement will continue until marijuana is completely legalized. Thank you for listening to my speech.